The warehouse erupted into chaos as Sergei Volkov lunged for Natasha, his face twisted with rage. She stumbled backward, her presentation board scattering across the concrete floor. But before Sergei could reach her, Dmitri materialized between them like a lethal shadow. The cold press of gunmetal against Sergei's temple froze him mid-stride. "I wouldn't," Dmitri said, his voice pleasant, but his eyes pure ice. Around them, 20 armed men shifted nervously as the Petrov security forces moved into position with military precision. Natasha's heart hammered against her ribs as she watched Nikolai step forward, his movements calculated and deadly calm. "Gentlemen," he addressed the room full of furious crime lords who'd just discovered they'd been sold forgeries. "I believe we have business to discuss." Sergei, however, is no longer part of the conversation. The click of multiple weapons being cocked echoed through the space. This was the moment everything could explode into violence, or the moment Natasha's evidence would destroy the man who murdered her father. She forced herself to stand tall between the twins, refusing to show fear, even as Sergei's eyes promised murder. "Your father died for less than this," he hissed. Natasha met his gaze without flinching. "My father died because you're a coward. I'm not. Hit that hype button if you're ready for this wild ride." The bullet shattered the champagne flute in Natasha Volkov's hand before she even heard the gunshot. Crystal exploded into 1,000 glittering fragments, catching the light from the chandeliers above like deadly stars. The golden liquid splashed across her black dress as she stumbled backward, her mind struggling to process what was happening. Around her, Moscow's elite scattered like frightened birds, their screams piercing through the classical music that still played from hidden speakers, oblivious to the chaos erupting in the Hermitage Gallery's main hall. Natasha's back hit the marble column behind her as another shot rang out, this one embedding itself in the 18th century portrait to her left. The painted eyes of some long-dead aristocrat now had a bullet hole directly between them, smoke curling from the canvas. Her heart hammered against her ribs, her breath coming in sharp gasps as she tried to understand who was shooting and why. Then she saw him. Viktor Morozov stood at the gallery's entrance, flanked by 2 men in black suits, a pistol hanging loosely in his right hand. His face was flushed red with vodka and rage, his expensive tie askew, his eyes scanning the panicked crowd with predatory focus. When his gaze locked onto Natasha, his lips curled into a cruel smile. "There you are, little dove," Victor called out, his voice carrying across the marble floors despite the screaming. "Did you think you could hide from me? Did you think I wouldn't find you here, surrounded by all these rich fools who pretend they're better than the rest of us?" Natasha's throat went dry. 3 million rubles. That's what her father had supposedly stolen before his death 6 months ago. Money that Victor claimed belonged to him. Money that Natasha had inherited, along with her father's debts. She'd been trying to gather the funds, selling everything she could, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. "Victor, please," she managed to say, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "I just need more time. I'm working on—" "Time?" Victor laughed, the sound harsh and brittle. "I gave you 30 days, Natasha. 30 days to come up with my money or offer yourself as payment in other ways." His eyes traveled down her body with undisguised hunger. "The 30 days are up." Before Natasha could respond, before she could run or plead or do anything at all, a voice cut through the gallery, like a blade through silk. "I believe the lady asked you to leave." The voice was cold, controlled, refined. It belonged to a man who stood near the eastern entrance, partially hidden in shadow. He stepped forward into the light, and Natasha's breath caught for an entirely different reason. He was tall, easily 6 feet 3 inches. with shoulders that filled out his midnight blue suit perfectly. His hair was dark, almost black, styled back from a face that could have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and aristocratic lines. But it was his eyes that held her attention, ice blue, penetrating, missing absolutely nothing as they assessed the situation, with the cool calculation of a man who had seen violence before and found it tedious. Victor's gun swung toward the newcomer. "This doesn't concern you, friend. Walk away while you still can." "I'm not your friend," the man replied, taking another step forward, with the unhurried confidence of someone who had never been afraid of anything in his life. "And you're making a scene in one of my family's favorite galleries. I find that terribly rude." "Your family's," Victor started. Then his face went pale as recognition dawned. "Petrov." "Nikolai Petrov," the man confirmed with a slight nod, as if he were introducing himself at a garden party rather than staring down the barrel of a gun. "And you must be Viktor Morozov. I've heard about you. Small-time loan shark trying to work his way up in the world by terrorizing young women at charity auctions." His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "How very impressive." Victor's hand trembled slightly, but he kept the gun raised. "The Petrovs don't own everything in Moscow. This is between me and her. She owes me money." "How much?" Nikolai asked, his tone conversational. 3 million rubles, plus interest." "Consider it paid." Nikolai pulled out his phone, typed something with his thumb, and within seconds Victor's own phone buzzed in his pocket. "Check your account. You'll find 3.5 million has just been transferred. The extra 500,000 is for your discretion in forgetting this matter ever existed." Victor stared at his phone screen, his expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, and finally, greedy satisfaction. But he wasn't stupid enough to be completely bought off. "Why would you do this? You don't even know her." "I don't need to know her," Nikolai said quietly, and now there was steel beneath the cultured tone. "What I do need is for you to leave this gallery in the next 30 seconds before my patience runs out, and I remember all the reasons why small-time thugs who pull guns at charity events tend to disappear in this city." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Victor's 2 bodyguards shifted nervously, seemed clearly recognizing the Petrov name and understanding what it meant. Victor himself seemed to be doing rapid calculations behind his eyes, weighing the money in his account against the danger of pushing his luck with one of the most powerful crime families in Eastern Europe. Greed won. It usually did. "Pleasure doing business," Victor muttered, lowering his weapon. He jerked his head at his men, and together they backed toward the exit, Victor's eyes lingering on Natasha one last time before he disappeared through the doors. The moment he was gone, the gallery erupted into nervous chatter. Security guards, who had been conspicuously absent during the confrontation, suddenly appeared, ushering guests toward the exits, apologizing profusely. Natasha remained frozen against the column, her whole body shaking, now that the immediate danger had passed. Nikolai turned to her, and up close, he was even more striking. There was something ancient in his eyes, something that spoke of old power and older traditions. When he smiled at her, it was warmer than she expected. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Natasha looked down at herself, at the champagne staining her dress, at her trembling hands. "No, I don't think so. She couldn't finish the sentence. Just terrified. Just humiliated. Just indebted now to a man far more dangerous than Victor could ever dream of being. Just in shock," Nikolai finished for her. "Perfectly understandable. Would you like to sit down? Perhaps some water?" Before she could answer, another voice joined the conversation, this one warmer, rougher around the edges. Kolya, what the hell happened? I heard gunshots. Natasha turned to see another man approaching from the gallery's back entrance, and her mind stuttered to a halt. He looked exactly like Nikolai. Same height, same build, same aristocratic features and ice-blue eyes. But where Nikolai was contained and controlled, this man radiated barely restrained energy. His suit was the same quality, but worn more casually. His tie loosened, his dark hair slightly disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. Identical twins? Of course. The Petrov twins. Natasha had heard rumors about them. Moscow's most eligible bachelors, co-heads of an empire that stretched from legitimate real estate to decidedly less legitimate enterprises. They were legends in the city, feared and respected in equal measure. Dmitri, Nikolai said, gesturing to his brother, we had a small disruption. Nothing that couldn't be handled. Dmitri's eyes found Natasha, and something flickered in their depths. Recognition, curiosity, interest. And who is this? Natasha Volkov, she managed to say, finding her voice. I'm the assistant curator here. Or I was. I'll probably be fired after tonight. Volkov, Dmitri repeated, his brow furrowing. Any relation to Alexei Volkov? The mention of her father's name made Natasha's chest tighten. He was my father. He died 6 months ago. The twins exchanged a glance, one of those wordless communications that only people who had known each other their entire lives could share. Dmitri's expression softened with what looked like genuine sympathy. I'm sorry for your loss, he said. Your father was a good man, honest, which is rare in our circles. Your circles? Natasha asked, though she already knew the answer. We knew him professionally, Nikolai explained carefully. He did some accounting work for our legitimate businesses. When he died, we wondered what had happened to his family. Just me, Natasha said quietly. My mother died when I was young. It's always been just him and me. And now it's just me. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling very cold despite the warmth of the gallery. And apparently, I'm the proud inheritor of 3 million rubles in debt to criminals. Not anymore, Nikolai reminded her. I paid Victor. You're free. Nothing is free, Natasha said, the words coming out sharper than she intended. Years of living on the edges of Moscow's underworld had taught her that much. What do you want from me? Nikolai smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. Direct. I like that. But truly, Miss Volkov, I want nothing. Consider it a gesture of respect for your father's memory. My brother is lying, Dmitri said cheerfully, earning a sharp look from Nikolai. He always wants something, but in this case, I think he actually just did a good deed. Shocking, I know. Despite everything, Natasha felt a smile tugging at her lips. There was something disarming about Dmitri's honesty, something that made the knot of anxiety in her chest loosen just slightly. However, Nikolai continued, shooting his brother an exasperated look, I would like to discuss something with you, if you're willing. Not here, obviously. Perhaps tomorrow? There's a cafe near Gorky Park, Cafe Pushkin. Would you meet me there for lunch? Every instinct Natasha had told her to refuse, to run, to get as far away from these men as possible. They were dangerous, probably more dangerous than Victor could ever be. But they had also just saved her life, saved her from a debt that would have destroyed her. And there was something in Nikolai's eyes that seemed almost lonely. Okay, she heard herself say. Tomorrow. 1 o'clock? Perfect. Nikolai pulled out a card from his inside jacket pocket and handed it to her. Heavy stock, embossed lettering. My personal number, in case you need anything before then. I should go, Natasha said, suddenly overwhelmed by everything that had happened. Thank you, both of you. I don't know how I'll ever repay. You don't need to repay anything, Dmitri interrupted gently. Just be safe getting home. These are dangerous times in Moscow. As Natasha gathered her things and made her way to the exit, she could feel their eyes on her back. When she glanced over her shoulder one last time, both twins were still watching her, their identical faces wearing very different expressions. Nikolai looked thoughtful, calculating. Dmitri looked intrigued, almost playful. She had no idea that her life had just changed forever. The next day, Natasha arrived at Cafe Pushkin 15 minutes early, her nerves making punctuality impossible. She changed her outfit 3 times before settling on a simple navy dress that was professional without being stuffy, elegant without trying too hard. She told herself this wasn't a date, that this was simply a business meeting with a man who had helped her. But her racing heart didn't seem to get the message. Nikolai was already there, seated at a corner table with a clear view of the entire restaurant. He stood when he saw her, the gesture old-fashioned and charming, and pulled out her chair before she could do it herself. Thank you for coming, he said as they settled in. I wasn't sure you would. I'm still not sure I should have, Natasha admitted. But curiosity got the better of me. A waiter appeared, and they ordered borscht for her, beef stroganoff for him, tea for both. Once they were alone again, Nikolai folded his hands on the table and studied her with those penetrating blue eyes. I want to tell you a story, he began, about 2 brothers who inherited an empire they didn't ask for, who spent their entire lives building something together, protecting each other, trusting each other completely. These brothers decided early on that they would never let anything come between them. Not power, not money, not ambition. They shared everything equally. Natasha listened, understanding that he was talking about himself and Dmitri, but choosing to frame it as a story. Then one night, both brothers saw the same woman across a crowded room, Nikolai continued. And for the first time in their lives, they wanted something they couldn't share. Or thought they couldn't. Natasha's breath caught. Nikolai. Let me finish, he said gently. Dmitri doesn't know I'm here. He thinks I'm at a business meeting. But last night after you left, we had a long conversation. We both felt drawn to you. Your courage, your honesty, the way you stood there even when you were terrified. We've met 1,000 women in our lives, Natasha, but none like you. You don't even know me, Natasha protested weakly. That's what I'd like to change. Nikolai leaned forward slightly. My brother and I have a proposition for you. An unusual one, admittedly, but we've never been conventional men. This was insane. This was absolutely insane. And Natasha should stand up right now and walk away. But she found herself leaning in too, drawn by the intensity in his eyes. What kind of proposition? Nikolai smiled and began to explain. Natasha stood in the center of her new bedroom, trying to comprehend how her life had become so surreal in the span of 72 hours. The room was larger than her entire previous apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked gardens that seemed to stretch endlessly into the Moscow countryside. The bed was a 4-poster monstrosity of dark wood and silk linens, the kind of bed that belonged in palaces or period dramas. There was a sitting area with a fireplace, a walk-in closet already filled with clothes, in exactly her size. How had they known? And a bathroom done entirely in white marble, with gold fixtures that probably cost more than she'd made in her entire career at the gallery. This was the Petrov estate. and she was actually here. She'd actually agreed to this madness. A soft knock at the door made her turn. "Come in." The door opened to reveal an elderly woman with sharp eyes and silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a traditional black dress and moved with the authority of someone who had been running households since before Natasha was born. "Miss Volkov," the woman said, her voice carrying a thick Russian accent. "I am Anya Petrovna, the boy's grandmother. Everyone calls me Babushka Anya. I wanted to meet the girl who has my grandsons turning themselves inside out with nerves." Natasha couldn't help but smile at the image of either Nikolai or Dmitri being nervous about anything. "I don't think I've made anyone nervous. I think I'm the only one who should be terrified right now." Babushka Anya stepped fully into the room and closed the door behind her. She studied Natasha with eyes that missed nothing, taking in every detail from her posture to the way she twisted her hands together. Finally, the old woman smiled. "You have good instincts to be frightened," she said bluntly. "This is a dangerous world you've entered, and my grandsons are dangerous men. But they are also good men in their way. They have honor, they have loyalty, and they have never brought a woman to this house before. That tells me everything I need to know about how they feel." "They barely know me," Natasha protested. "This whole arrangement is—" "Unconventional?" Babushka Anya supplied, settling herself in one of the armchairs by the fireplace and gesturing for Natasha to sit across from her. "Yes, but the Petrovs have never done anything conventionally. Their grandfather, my late husband, he built this empire from nothing. He was unconventional too. He married me when I was a singer in a nightclub, when everyone said he should marry some proper mafia princess. We had 43 years together before he died." Natasha sank into the opposite chair, drawn in despite herself. Nikolai explained the terms of the arrangement. 6 months of courtship with both of them. Then I choose one, or I walk away free. "And what did you think when he proposed this?" the old woman asked shrewdly. "I thought he was insane," Natasha admitted. "I thought both of them were insane. I thought I was insane for even considering it. But then I went home to my tiny apartment, and I looked at my father's picture on the mantel, and I thought about what my life had become. Working a job I loved, but that barely paid my bills. Constantly looking over my shoulder for people like Victor, always afraid, always alone. And I thought, what if I took a chance? What if I said yes to something impossible?" "So you said yes?" "I said yes." Natasha laughed shakily. "God help me. I said yes." Babushka Anya reached over and patted her hand. "Then let me give you some advice, child. My grandsons may look identical, but they are very different men. Nikolai is the head, always thinking, always planning. Dmitri is the heart, feeling everything deeply even when he pretends not to. You will need to understand both to survive this arrangement." "I'm not sure I understand either of them yet," Natasha confessed. "You will," the old woman said with certainty. "And they will come to understand you too. That's what these 6 months are for. Truth. Now come. They're waiting for you in the library. Nikolai wants to show you something." The Petrov Estates library was exactly what Natasha expected from men who commanded an empire. 2 stories of floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with leather-bound books in Russian, English, French, and languages she couldn't even identify. A spiral staircase led to the upper level, and comfortable leather chairs were scattered throughout, creating intimate reading nooks. The smell of old paper and wood polish hung in the air like incense. Nikolai stood by one of the tall windows, backlit by the afternoon sun, looking every inch the intellectual crime lord. He turned when she entered and his face lit up with genuine pleasure. Natasha, thank you for coming down. I wanted to show you this. He gestured to the shelves around them. This library has been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather started the collection, my father expanded it, and Dmitri and I have continued the tradition. I thought, given your work with art, you might appreciate rare books as well. Natasha moved closer, running her fingers along the spines. First editions, many of them. Pushkin, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Chekhov. Some of these had to be worth fortunes. This is incredible, she breathed. I'm glad you think so. Nikolai pulled out a slim volume and handed it to her carefully. This is a first edition of Anna Karenina. It was my mother's favorite. She died when Dmitri and I were 12, but I remember her sitting in that chair over there, reading this book over and over. Natasha took the book with reverent hands, feeling the weight of history and grief in its pages. I'm so sorry. Losing a parent young it changes you. Yes, Nikolai agreed quietly. It does. Our father tried to be both parents after that, but he was busy with the business, and then he died too, when we were 22. It's been just Dmitri and me for a decade now. We've built everything together, decided everything together. The idea of anything coming between us is, he paused, searching for words, unacceptable. Then why risk it? Natasha asked. Why not just let me go? Find women you don't both want. Nikolai stepped closer and Natasha could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle, like cedar and bergamot. Because some things are worth the risk. Because when I saw you last night, standing there afraid but refusing to run, I saw someone remarkable. Dmitri saw it too, and we thought, maybe there's a way to do this without tearing ourselves apart. Or maybe you'll all end up miserable, Natasha said softly. Maybe, Nikolai acknowledged. But at least we'll know we tried. He smiled then, transforming his stern features into something warmer. Besides, 6 months isn't so long. You might find you can't stand either of us by the end of it. Before Natasha could respond, the library doors burst open, and Dmitri strode in, bringing energy with him like a force of nature. He was dressed more casually than his brother. Jeans, a black t-shirt, leather jacket. But he moved with the same unconscious grace. There you are, he said, his eyes finding Natasha immediately. Kolya's already trying to impress you with his dusty books, I see. Come on, I want to show you something actually interesting. Nikolai rolled his eyes. Some of us appreciate culture and history, Dima. And some of us appreciate living in the present, Dmitri shot back. But there was affection in his tone. He held out his hand to Natasha. Trust me? It was a loaded question, Natasha knew. She barely knew this man, barely knew either of them. But she'd already said yes to this arrangement, already agreed to 6 months of impossibility. She took his hand. Dmitri led her through the estate's winding corridors, Nikolai following behind with an amused expression. They passed servants who bowed their heads respectfully, security guards who nodded at the twins, rooms that Natasha glimpsed only briefly, a formal dining room, a den with a massive television, what looked like a gym. Finally, they reached a door that Dmitri opened with obvious pride. This, he announced, is my favorite room in the whole house. It was a music room, and it was glorious. A grand piano sat in the center, its black lacquer gleaming. The walls were lined with instruments, guitars, violins, even a cello. Vinyl records filled one wall, thousands of them, organized with meticulous care. My mother was a pianist, Dmitri explained, moving to the piano and running his hands over the keys without pressing them. She used to play for us every night before bed. After she died, I taught myself. It's how I think, I guess. Kolya has his books and his chess. I have this." He sat down at the bench and began to play, and Natasha felt her breath catch. The music was Rachmaninoff, complex and emotional, and Dmitri played it with a passion that seemed to define everything he did. His eyes closed. His body moved with the music, and for those few minutes, he wasn't a feared mafia enforcer. He was just a man who had lost his mother too young and found solace in the songs she loved. When the last notes faded, Natasha found she had tears on her cheeks. Dmitri opened his eyes and saw them, and his expression softened. "Sorry," he said. "I get carried away sometimes." "Don't apologize," Natasha managed. "That was beautiful." "My brother hides his heart behind his fists," Nikolai said from the doorway, his voice gentle. "But it's there, deeper than most people's." Dmitri stood and crossed to Natasha, reaching out to wipe away her tears with his thumb. The gesture was intimate, familiar, in a way that should have felt presumptuous, but somehow didn't. "I wanted you to see this side of me early, before you only know me as the dangerous one, the violent one. I am those things, Natasha. I won't lie, but I'm this too." "We both are," Nikolai added, moving to stand beside his brother. "Dangerous and decent, violent and gentle. We've had to be, to survive in this world." Natasha looked between them, these two identical faces with such different souls shining through, and felt something shift in her chest. Fear was still there, uncertainty too, but also curiosity, also possibility. "Show me," she said. "Show me who you really are. Both of you. That's what these 6 months are for, right? Truth?" The brothers exchanged one of their wordless glances, and then both smiled. Truth. They agreed in unison. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that was bizarre and beautiful in equal measure. Natasha kept her mornings to herself, working remotely on art authentication projects that Nikolai helped her secure, maintaining some semblance of independence. Her afternoons and evenings, though, belonged to the twins. With Nikolai, she discovered a world of quiet intensity. They played chess in the library, and he taught her to think 3 moves ahead, to anticipate consequences, to plan. They discussed philosophy over afternoon tea, Kant and Nietzsche, Dostoevsky and Camus. He showed her the legitimate side of the Petrov Empire, the real estate holdings, the art galleries they owned, the charitable foundations that bore his mother's name. He was honest about the criminal enterprises, too, never hiding what he was, but always emphasizing his goal of transitioning everything legitimate within a generation. "My grandfather had no choice but to be a criminal," he told her one evening as they walked through the estate gardens. "My father had fewer choices than that. But Dmitri and I, we have options. We can choose to be more. I want that, Natasha. I want to build something clean for the future." With Dmitri, Natasha discovered passion and spontaneity. He took her to underground clubs where everyone knew his name, where the music was loud and the dancing wild. He taught her to shoot at the private range, patient with her initial fumbling, proud when she finally hit the target center. He cooked for her in the estate's kitchen, his mother's recipes that babushka Anya had taught him, filling the room with the scents of garlic and dill and simmering meat. He was tactile in ways his brother wasn't, always touching her shoulder, taking her hand, and pulling her into impromptu dances in the hallway when a song he loved came on. "Kolya thinks too much," Dmitri said one night as they danced in the music room. No music playing except what he hummed. "I feel too much. Between us, We make one functional person. I think you're both more functional than you give yourselves credit for, Natasha replied, letting him spin her. Maybe, he conceded, or maybe we just need the right person to balance us out. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning, and Natasha found she couldn't respond. Because increasingly, she was starting to feel something she'd never expected. She was falling for both of them. Not in halves, not divided loyalty, but completely for each in different ways. Nikolai's quiet strength called to the part of her that craved stability and depth. Dimitri's fierce joy called to the part of her that wanted to feel alive. Together, they were becoming essential to her, and the realization terrified her. It was Babushka Anya who noticed first, of course. She cornered Natasha in the garden one afternoon in early autumn, when the leaves were just beginning to turn and the air held a crisp promise of winter. "You're falling for them," the old woman stated bluntly. "Both of them." Natasha didn't bother denying it. "Is that wrong? Is it even possible?" "Wrong. No. Complicated. Yes." Babushka Anya settled onto a garden bench and patted the space beside her. "When my husband first brought me to this house, his family thought I was wrong for him. Too common, too outspoken, too much. But he loved me anyway, and I loved him. And we made it work because we chose each other every day. The choice is what matters, Natasha. Not what people think, not what's traditional. The choice." "But how do I choose between them?" Natasha asked desperately. "How do I pick one without destroying the other?" "Who says you have to?" the old woman asked cryptically, and before Natasha could press her on what that meant, Babushka Anya stood and walked away, leaving Natasha alone with her turbulent thoughts. That night, everything changed. Natasha was reading in her room when she heard raised voices from downstairs. She shouldn't have investigated, should have minded her own business, but she'd learned that in this house, everything eventually became her business. She crept to the top of the stairs and heard Nikolai and Dmitri in the study below, their voices tight with tension. "I see how she looks at you," Dmitri was saying. "Like you hold all the answers. Like you're the mature one, the stable one. How am I supposed to compete with that?" "Compete?" Nikolai's voice was anguished. "You think I don't see her light up when you walk into a room? You make her laugh, Dima. You make her dance. I can give her security, but you give her joy." "We're going to lose each other over this," Dmitri said, and there was real fear in his voice. "We're going to destroy what we've built." "Not if we trust her choice," Nikolai replied. "Not if we trust each other, like we always have." Natasha couldn't listen anymore. She stepped into view at the top of the stairs, and both men looked up, their identical faces wearing matching expressions of shock and dismay. "I heard you," she said quietly, descending the stairs. "And you're both wrong. You're not competing. You're not losing each other. And I'm not choosing between you because I can't. I won't." She reached the bottom of the stairs and stood before them, her heart pounding. "I'm falling in love with both of you. Not because I'm confused or indecisive, but because you're both extraordinary in completely different ways. Nikolai, you make me feel safe and valued and intellectually alive. Dmitri, you make me feel passionate and spontaneous and free. Together, you've shown me what it means to be truly seen by someone. And the idea of choosing one and losing the other is breaking my heart." The twins stared at her, then at each other. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Dmitri laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. "So what do we do?" he asked. "Because I'm in love with you too, Natasha. Completely. Impossibly." "As am I," Nikolai admitted, his controlled facade cracking. I didn't expect this. I didn't plan for this. But here we are. Here we are, Natasha echoed. Three people who care about each other, trapped in an arrangement that demands someone lose. That's not truth, Nikolai. That's tragedy. She turned and walked back upstairs, leaving the brothers standing in stunned silence. She'd said what she needed to say. Now they had to decide what came next. The morning after Natasha's confession, she woke to find an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a note in Nikolai's precise handwriting. Meet us in the library at noon, please. She spent the hours until then pacing her room, rehearsing and abandoning a dozen speeches. She'd upended their arrangement completely, shattered the neat boundaries they'd established. They probably wanted to end this now, send her away before things got messier. She should be relieved. Instead, she felt like something vital was being torn away. At exactly noon, she descended to the library. Both twins were there, standing by the windows, dressed in matching dark suits. They turned when she entered, and the synchronization of the movement would have been comical in any other circumstances. Thank you for coming, Nikolai began. Dmitri and I spent the entire night talking, really talking, maybe more honestly than we have in years. We've always shared everything, Dmitri picked up. Built this empire together, fought our battles together, made every major decision together. We thought this, you, would be the thing that finally divided us. But you were right, Nikolai continued. The arrangement we proposed was designed to force a choice, to create a winner and a loser. That was cowardice dressed up as civility. Natasha's heart was racing. What are you saying? The twins exchanged a look, and then both moved closer to her. Dmitri spoke first, his voice rough with emotion. We're saying we want to try something different, something unprecedented, something that probably makes us all insane, but we want to try it anyway. No choice, Nikolai said softly. No competition. Just the three of us, figuring out what this could be, if we stop trying to force it into a conventional shape. Natasha's breath caught. We mean we're both in love with you, Dmitri said bluntly. And we're not willing to give you up, either of us. So if you're willing, if you're brave enough, we want to see if there's a way to make this work. All three of us together. Before Natasha could respond, before she could even process what they were suggesting, the library doors burst open, and one of the security guards rushed in, his face pale. Sir, he addressed Nikolai urgently. We have a situation. Sergei Volkov is here with 20 men. He's demanding to see Miss Volkov immediately. The blood drained from Natasha's face. Sergei Volkov, her uncle, her father's estranged brother, a man she'd never met but had heard whispered about with fear. What does he want with me? Nikolai's expression had gone cold and deadly. Stay here. Dmitri. Already on it, Dmitri said, pulling out his phone and barking orders in rapid Russian. Within seconds, Natasha could hear movement throughout the house. Security mobilizing. Weapons being readied. This was the other side of the Petrov twins, the side she'd heard about but never witnessed. These were men who commanded armies. I'm coming with you, Natasha said firmly. Absolutely not, both twins said in unison. He's here for me, Natasha insisted. Whatever this is about, hiding won't solve it. Let me face him. Nikolai looked like he wanted to argue, but Dmitri nodded slowly. She's right, and we'll be beside her the whole time. Nothing happens to her. Nothing. They found Sergei Volkov in the estate's grand foyer, a barrel-chested man in his 50s, with Natasha's father's eyes and none of his kindness. He was flanked by armed men, but the Petrov security had them outnumbered and outgunned. It was a standoff. tense and dangerous. "Natasha," Sergei said, when he saw her descending the stairs between the twins. "My poor lost niece. Do you know who these men are? What they've done?" "I know exactly who they are," Natasha replied, her voice steady despite her fear. "The question is, who are you? I've never met you before. My father never spoke of you." "Because your father was a coward and a traitor," Sergei spat. "He worked for me, did my books, and then he tried to steal from me and run. When I found out, I made sure he couldn't run anymore." The words hit Natasha like physical blows. "You're saying you killed my father?" "I'm saying your father's death was his own fault," Sergei corrected coldly. "And the debt he owed me? That passes to you. 3 million rubles, plus 6 months of interest. 7 million now." "That debt was already paid," Nikolai said, his voice arctic. "I transferred the money to Viktor Morozov weeks ago." Sergei laughed, a harsh sound. "Viktor was working for me, you fool. He was supposed to bring me the girl, not settle for money. But you Petrovs had to interfere, had to take what wasn't yours. So now I'm here to collect what belongs to me." "I don't belong to anyone," Natasha said fiercely. "You belong to me," Sergei insisted. "Family blood, family debt. That's how this works. You'll come with me now, work off what your father owed. And maybe, I'll let you live once the debt is satisfied." Dmitri moved slightly in front of Natasha, his body language screaming danger. "She's not going anywhere with you." "This isn't your concern, Petrov." "She is our concern," Nikolai said quietly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. She's under our protection. She lives in our home. She's ours. And if you think you're leaving here with her, you're more deluded than your reputation suggests." For a moment, Natasha thought violence would erupt right there in the foyer. Sergei's hand moved toward his weapon, his men tensing. But then something changed in his expression. A calculation, a recognition of odds he didn't like. "This isn't over," he said, pointing at Natasha. "I'll give you 1 week to reconsider, niece. 1 week to leave these fools and come to me willingly. After that, I'll take you by force, and everyone in this house will pay the price." He turned and left, his men filing out behind him. The moment the doors closed, Natasha's legs gave out. Dmitri caught her, pulling her against his chest as she shook. "We won't let him take you," he murmured into her hair. "I promise you that." "He killed my father," Natasha whispered. "All this time, I thought it was an accident, a heart attack. But he killed him." Nikolai knelt beside them, his hand on her back. "We'll handle Sergei. But first, we need to understand what we're dealing with. Dmitri, call our contacts in the Federal Security Service. I want everything on Sergei Volkov, his operations, his allies, his weaknesses. We end this threat before the week is up." Over the next 6 days, the Petrov estate became a fortress. Additional security arrived. The twins worked around the clock, and Natasha watched them operate as the criminal empire's true leaders. Nikolai orchestrated strategy with cold precision, calling in favors, making deals, moving pieces on a chessboard only he could see. Dmitri led tactical teams, personally overseeing security improvements, training scenarios, weapons checks. But despite the danger, despite everything, they never stopped making time for her. Nikolai would pull her into the library for quiet conversations over tea, discussing everything except Sergei, giving her mind a break from fear. Dmitri would insist she eat, that she sleep, that she maintain some normalcy, even as the world felt like it was collapsing. And late at night, when Natasha couldn't sleep, she'd find both of them in the study, working side by side, and she'd see the bond between them. unbreakable, profound. They were two halves of one whole, and increasingly, she felt like she was becoming part of that whole too. On the sixth day, Nikolai called Natasha to the study. Dmitri was already there, and between them, on the desk, was a folder thick with documents. "We found Sergei's weakness," Nikolai said, without preamble. "He's been smuggling art forgeries through Eastern Europe, selling them to oligarchs and criminal organizations as authentic pieces. The profits fund his entire operation." "How does that help us?" Natasha asked. "Because you're an art authentication expert," Dmitri said, smiling grimly. "We need you to do what you do best. Prove the forgeries are fake, publicly, in a way that destroys his credibility and his business." Natasha looked at the documents: shipping manifests, sales records, photographs of paintings and sculptures. Her trained eye immediately spotted inconsistencies, telltale signs of forgery. She could do this. She could bring down the man who killed her father. "When?" she asked. "Tonight," Nikolai replied. "We've arranged a meeting with several of Sergei's biggest clients, told them we have information about their recent purchases. You'll present the evidence. We'll have security in place to protect you. But there is risk, Natasha. We won't force you to do this." "I'll do it," she said, without hesitation. "For my father, and for us." The meeting took place in a neutral location, a warehouse on the outskirts of Moscow, carefully chosen for its tactical advantages. Sergei arrived with his men, confident and sneering, clearly expecting the Petrovs to hand Natasha over. Instead, he found a room full of his most powerful clients, all looking very interested in what this young woman had to say. Natasha presented her findings with professional precision, displaying photographs, pointing out anachronistic details, explaining chemical analysis results that proved the paintings were modern forgeries, not centuries-old masterpieces. She watched Sergei's face go from confused to pale to enraged, as his client's expressions turned murderous. "You lying little..." Sergei started toward her, but Dmitri was there instantly, a gun to Sergei's head before the man could take 2 steps. "I wouldn't," Dmitri said pleasantly. One of the clients, a man Natasha recognized as a federal minister, stood slowly. "Sergei Volkov, you've sold us fakes, stolen our money, made fools of us. I think we need to have a conversation about restitution." "And protection?" another client added, looking at the Petrov twins. "Perhaps a new partnership with more honest suppliers." Nikolai stepped forward, all business. "Gentlemen, I'm sure we can arrange something mutually beneficial. Sergei, however, will not be part of those arrangements." What happened next happened fast. Sergei's men, realizing they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered, abandoned their boss. Sergei himself tried to run, but was caught by the minister's security. As he was dragged away, he locked eyes with Natasha one last time. "Your father died for less than this," he hissed. "My father died because you're a coward who kills people rather than facing your failures." Natasha replied coldly, "I hope you rot." Outside the warehouse, as they climbed into the armored car, Natasha finally let herself shake. Both twins wrapped around her immediately, creating a protective cocoon of warmth and safety. "It's over," Nikolai murmured. "Sergei will be lucky if he survives the week. I'll let alone poses any threat to you." "You were incredible in there," Dmitri added. "Absolutely fearless." "I wasn't fearless," Natasha admitted. "I was terrified. But I knew you'd both protect me. I trusted you." Back at the estate, Babushka Anya was waiting with hot tea and knowing eyes. She pulled Natasha aside while the twins debriefed their security team. "You saved those boys tonight," the old woman said. Not from Sergei. From themselves. They've been so afraid of losing each other over you that they couldn't see the obvious solution right in front of them. What solution? Natasha asked. That love doesn't have to fit into the boxes society gives us. Babushka Anya replied. My grandsons have spent their lives breaking rules to build their empire. Why should their personal lives be any different? She pressed something into Natasha's hand, a small, worn photograph. It showed a much younger Babushka Anya standing between two men, all three of them smiling. My husband and his brother, she explained softly. We didn't have a word for it then, didn't have a structure for it, but we loved each other, all three of us, until the brother died in the war. After that, it was just my husband and me, but we always kept his brother's memory alive between us. Love is love, child. The shape it takes matters less than the truth of it. Natasha stared at the photograph, understanding dawning. You're saying... I'm saying my grandsons are asking you to marry them, both of them. And I'm saying you should give them an answer. The twins found her an hour later in the music room, where she'd been sitting at Dmitri's piano, not playing, just thinking. They entered together, as they did everything, and sat on either side of her on the bench. We need to talk, Nikolai began. About what happens next, Dmitri continued. We know what we want, they said in unison, then laughed at their synchronization. Nikolai took her left hand. We want you to stay. Not as a guest, not as part of some temporary arrangement, but permanently. Dmitri took her right hand. We want to build something new, something that's never existed in our world, a family that doesn't fit the mold. We're asking you to marry us, Nikolai said quietly. Both of us. We've already spoken to our lawyers, figured out the legal structures. It's unconventional, yes, but we've never been conventional men. We love you, Dmitri added simply. You're both of us, completely, and we're not willing to let you go or to force you to choose. So we're offering you a choice, all of us together, or none of us at all. Natasha looked between them, these two extraordinary men who had crashed into her life and turned it upside down. She thought about the past months, the ways they'd shown her different kinds of love, different kinds of strength. She thought about how she felt complete with both of them, how the idea of choosing one had always felt like cutting herself in half. Yes, she said, tears streaming down her face. Yes to both of you. Yes to this impossible, beautiful thing we're building. Yes. They kissed her then, both of them, one after the other, sweet and reverent and full of promise. And Natasha felt, for the first time in her life, that she was exactly where she belonged. The wedding was small, private, held in the estate's gardens under Babushka Anya's approving eye. They created their own ceremony, their own vows, their own traditions. Nikolai placed a sapphire ring on Natasha's left hand, representing wisdom and loyalty. Dmitri placed a ruby ring on her right hand, representing passion and courage, and Natasha gave them both matching platinum bands engraved with words from Pushkin. Together, we are invincible. In the months that followed, they built their unconventional family. Natasha revolutionized the Petrov Empire's legitimate businesses, using her art expertise to establish galleries and cultural foundations that gradually shifted the family's image. Nikolai continued his work legitimizing their enterprises, transitioning power, building a future. Dmitri restructured their security, making them safer without escalating violence. And together, the three of them created something Moscow had never seen, a partnership based on truth, trust, and a love too big to fit conventional shapes. They faced judgment, faced opposition, faced whispers and stares. But within the walls of their estate, within the circle of their family, they had everything they needed. 1 year after the wedding, Natasha stood in the gardens where they'd married, watching Nikolai and Dmitri argue cheerfully about chess strategy. Babushka Anya appeared at her elbow, following her gaze. "Regrets?" the old woman asked. "Not a single one," Natasha replied honestly. "Good," Babushka Anya said with satisfaction. "You chose truth over tradition, love over convention. That takes more courage than most people have." She patted Natasha's hand. "My grandsons chose well, and so did you." Natasha smiled, watching the twins finally notice her and wave her over to settle their argument. She crossed the garden to them, to her husbands, to her impossible and perfect life, and thought that sometimes the best choices were the ones that looked like madness from the outside, but felt like home from within. Did you love Natasha, Nikolai, and Dmitri's unconventional love story? Subscribe for more unique romance tales that break all the rules. Drop a comment telling me which twin you'd choose, or if you'd be brave enough to choose both. Hit that notification bell so you never miss the next passionate, boundary-breaking story. Share this with someone who believes in love beyond traditional limits.